Voila.
Wait, wrong screen. Oops. So wait, I've got.
Oh, 1 second. Michelle, can you turn off some? There we go. We're good. We had some feedback for a sec. We're good.
So this is my seed concept for Truth or Something Like It by Nikhil, Katara. So I was actually well, it was this line, something about solar panels and the use of well, light, because they do a lot of like shadows in the wait. Oops, sorry. I clicked something. Sorry.
It's okay. It didn't change anything for us.
Huh. Wait, oh, there. Because they play with a lot of light and shadow.
Okay.
And yes.
do you have an image open?
Huh, wait.
We can just
Oh.
Do you see it? No. Or
I just see your folder with all the
weird
options.
Wait. How about like now?
There we go. That's perfect.
Okay.
We see an image with one character in the middle and a bike. That's what you want? Okay, great.
Yes. So well, she mentioned ideally to like either use like object theater or puppetry. But I was thinking, because of the reference to like solar energy, so I remembered there's this project, or it's an NGO. I don't know if it started in another country, but here in the Philippines, they usually use it for like low income communities. So it's actually mixing bleach with water to create light. So it's actually called a liter of light. So as you can see, it's just like bottles. Wait, sorry.
Interesting.
There. So, and then because of the solar energy aspect, because years ago, like maybe in like the early 2000s, it was really just like water, bleach, and sunlight. And then I think later on, because they already like discovered like these like rechargeable solar panels that you can get like for really cheap. You charge it and then add it to these like water bottles with bleach and then create like light. So that was like the idea for this set. So because it happens like in like the city streets, I was thinking maybe it's sort of like the windows like in the skyline, or like from like the houses that they pass. So it depends on like which light turns on and off at like a specific time. So that's what creates like the shadows of like the people in the areas that they pass. And then I just made like a close-up of a bike. I was thinking it's more of like this like DIY bike that you kind of like build yourself out of like stuff from like a junk shop, especially like in like I guess like lower income communities where you want something and you just like build it yourself. So yeah, like
amazing.
I just like made it like this. And then they mentioned something about like riding, I don't know how you pronounce it, pillion, but we do it a lot of times. Like I even like ride that to work sometimes because traffic is really bad. So usually like all your stuff, you just put it into these like random, like either like hooks, baskets that's attached to the bike. So in one scene, she was lying on the ground. So I was thinking of like maybe tarps that you like stick together, or like plastic bags, or and then it's just like tied to the bike, and then later on she just like uses it as like a mat or something like that. So these are just like different angles of the, yeah, so there, I think that's it.
Very cool.
I was thinking maybe it might work for like a scale model and like stop motion animation for, because of the I think it's something that I could control, like with the light fixtures with this like bleach. I actually tried it, but I just don't have it right now because I couldn't control it. But yeah, it actually works. I just don't know if, well, in the communities it works. So maybe in a theater or a black box, it might have the same effect, maybe. So.
And you could also do this in a community, like you could do it in a public place if you found that the lights don't work inside a theater.
Yeah.
I feel like everything you've proposed here could be a very possible site-specific, almost traveling sort of production. Like maybe there's a way that all the supplies for the light making can be put on a trailer that the bike pulls, and all the props are on the bike. And, you know, the beginning of the play is getting everybody to make the lights and then hang them. And then you do the show just in a square. So I think there's so much potential for this show to work in the theater, but also it would be a very exciting show to consider traveling around, especially with this bike prop. That would be such a cool thing.
Right. Yeah, because they similar to like those I don't know, like tuk-tuks or rickshaws that you can just like attach like a carriage type thing. Yeah.
Exactly. There's a company in Toronto that actually, they're like a traveling DJ. So they bike around their speakers around the city, and they power the speakers by biking. So there's also potential, if you decide that the lights are not reliable enough and you wanted to be able to like power lights, there could be a way to connect that with the bike as well. So I think there's so many extensions of this into reality that could be really exciting from like an eco-scenography point of view.
Lawyn,
yes.
tell us more about the solar.
Sorry, I'm getting feedback.
Michelle, can you just use your phone?
I'm trying. Yeah, it was my mistake to attempt to use my laptop.
Okay, this is much better now. We can hear you now.
Yeah. So, could you tell us more about the solar technology used to make these lanterns and how it sort of works with bleach? Like, I'm not familiar with the technology.
I could actually show a video I found on YouTube from the NGO. Let me just
open
it. Here, so I will just share my screen. I can share the link as well, but
Dyan po sa bubungan natin.
Nakakatipid kami sa kuryente. Kasi pag-araw, hindi na kami nag-iilaw dyan kasi yun na ang ilaw namin. Talagang maliwanag na maliwanag siya. Lalo pag sobrang ang init.
Maraming nabituwa sa imbit na to. sa kuryente na malaking tipid rin nila eh. Kaya gustong-gusto rin nila eh. Ito, wala na itong patayan eh.
Nabalitaan namin na may mag-aano daw dito ng solar. So, interesado kami na matuto dahil kailangan namin yun dito. Kaya pumunta kami.
So magsimula muna tayo sa bote kung saan pumapasok yung araw sa umaga. Pero yung mas importante talaga is yung panggabi.
The revisions we made for the standard solar bulb kasi useful lang siya sa morning. So, pagdating na ng gabi, since wala na tayong araw, wala nang sun, hindi na siya magagamit ng mga pamilya na install ng solar light. What we have here, we designed a simple circuit kung saan pagdating ng gabi, automatic mag-trigger siya, mag-on na yung light sa ilalim. Tapos, ginawa rin namin available yung buong sirkito na madaling intindihin ng mga tao.
So ito po yung dati nating bote. Ito po yung nadagdag na po natin yung ilaw. Pag umaga, nakita niyo po hindi gumaga kasi may araw pa. Pero pagdating po ng gabi, pag tinakpan niyo po yan, automatic po mag-on.
Theoretically speaking, sa 1 watt LED na to, sa high power na LED, kayang-kaya niya magpailaw ng 15 square meters na kwarto na ito lang. Tapos reading light po siya. Ibig sabihin, sa ilaw lang na ito, kayang-kaya mo na magbasa ng libro.
Napakalaking bagay para sa katulad namin dito sa mundo. Excited lalo ako, masasabi ko sa mga kababaihan dito na ito ay pwede natin gamitin na hanap buhay, lalo sa mahirap na buhay natin dito.
So, something.
That's super interesting. And where is the NGO located?
There's one here in Manila. I'm not sure if they have something similar in other countries.
Okay. Because I think that's a really interesting local partnership that you could pursue too. If you were to make this production realized, you could contact them and say, hey, I want to use this show as a way to gather people so that you partner with me, you show the audience how to make the lights, we set them up for the show, and then they get to take them home. So you could collaborate with them as like using the theater piece to bring the audience, and then they also get a takeaway, which is a tangible skill and thing they can use in their lives to make their lives better. So I think there's so much potential for a really local extension of partnership, community building, education. Super exciting.
And I think, yeah, for like communities like that, they really don't get to experience or watch anything or like, you know, be involved in anything like performance or theater related. So it's a good way to like bring it to them.
Yeah. And then what is in the play in terms of the context of the play? Do they speak about renewable energy at all or solar power in the play?
Yes, they do.
Okay. That's great.
Maybe it's something I can do when, because we're still, I guess, in lockdown. So maybe when we're back to normal, it's something.
It could be a really cool
actually,
project for your students too, to help with, you know? How old are your students?
They're like 19, 20.
Oh,
like
yeah.
BAs, yeah.
That would be great. Well, it sounds like you have a great lesson plan in your back pocket now. And then I think the only other key partnership would be, if I don't know if you have these in your community, but I know in mine we have places where people make bikes. So they use old parts and they actually make bikes, and they teach people how to repair bikes and keep them in good maintenance. So another cool extension of your project would be if you could find an organization locally who might have that same interest and that same expertise, and also work with them to build your custom traveling theater kit.
Yeah. Oh, actually, I forgot to mention the bike is also made of bamboo, because there's a local, it's probably like being used like in different like tourist spots, but like we call it the bike, the bamboo bike. So might be an interesting partnership with that other NGO eventually. Let's see, I hope it happens, but yeah.
That's amazing. So I would say if you have a little bit of time to just put your model in an open square environment rather than a theater, just to see how that feels for you. That could be a really just one next step you could take if you have the time and that's easy enough for you in your modeling software. I don't know which modeling software you're using.
Yeah, SketchUp for now.
SketchUp, like if it's not really quick and easy, you could even just write it in a description of like where you would want to take it into the community. But if it's easy enough to just try throwing it into like a market context or a public area, just to see how it looks. Obviously no pressure, because this whole experience is based on what availability and time you have.
Yeah, but I think, yeah, like long term, if I see myself like doing something like in this direction. So.
Yeah. And just in terms of timeline for the charrette, so even though the festival is finishing December 18th, the students who we've been working with, they're going to keep working on their seed concepts until February. So I am also offering an extension to participants to like do any final touches, any extra work they might want to do, because with the students, we'll be trying to figure out how to exhibit these seed concepts at World Stage Design. So if that helps at all to know there's a little extra time to fully like adapt to your concept if you feel compelled, that is also there.
Okay, I'll try to do that.
Amazing. Super exciting. I love it. And Sarah, what have you been working on?
I'm looking at 2 shows, and I'm really interested in this idea of fire. I think we've talked about it before, but like growing up, I grew up in California in the mountains. And so like fire was omnipresent for me. And I've really been like struggling with my own like settler colonialism ideas about fire, that like fire is dangerous and fire is scary. And sort of having this reckoning of like what we've done to the earth has made this settler colonialist idea reality, whereas it never was a reality before. And so like what is this relationship to fire? So one of the shows I'm working on is the persistent possibility about the Paradise Fire, and like I know people who lived in Paradise, so like it feels really personal, and also is just like a moment for me of like personal reckoning as well as like artistic reckoning with this idea of fire. And so I'm still in like very early stages on this, honestly, because I just opened a show last week, so it's just been like stewing around in my brain. But I'm really interested in the way that fire feels threatening, but also like that it's important. The relationship is really important with it, and so thinking about what that is and how I do that. Again, I'm in very early stages, but that's been in my mind sort of constantly, thinking about. I do a lot of like weaving and like bioplastic and sort of things like that are like from the ground up. And so thinking about the things that are precious to me and like how flame would interact with them. And like, for instance, like in costume, you always do like burn tests to see how things react. And so like, what is the burn test on my creativity? I guess is really interesting to me. And like, what can I create that I can burn? And like, what will that mean for me and for the piece, and how that interaction speaks to these bigger questions about fire and human relationships. So that's kind of where I am right now.
That's really exciting. I would say as you move forward, please take advantage of the time we have still. So even the students, they're going to finish up in February, but we really have until August. So if you need time, ask for it, because we want to make sure that you get the most out of the process. And I'll be following up with some sort of guiding timelines in the new year just to keep everybody on track. And then I would say, like, as you work, it'd be really great to get as much documentation as possible of your process, Even the process of creating the thing that you're going to do the fire test on would be really nice to see. If you have any capabilities of video documentation of you just working, I think that would be really important in terms of kind of trying to weave a new relationship, sort of as a metaphor. And then all of the steps from there, like what happens with the burn test and after, and if there's a interaction with the material after you burn it as well.
Yeah.
So I have this vision of like a pretty interesting video documentation of process for you, because your work is so material based.
Yeah.
And I think that would be really interesting.
Love
and
that
then
idea.
I'd also think about researching some regenerative properties of fire in different cultures, because I do think that it's important you bring up the settler perspective of fear, but I think a lot of different, value systems see it out actually as like a new beginning as well. So what is that other side of the equation?
Yeah, and even like growing up, I live near the giant sequoias, and the giant sequoias can only, like the seeds can only open and like grow with a fire temperature of like 2000 degrees. So they have to have fire in order to grow, or they won't be able to like carry on. So like the indigenous Miwoks who lived in the Yosemite National Park, like that in the Yosemite Valley, like their work with fire was also to like help the giant sequoias like seed and regrow. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
That's really interesting. I didn't know that specific like tree had that relationship. That's so cool. Is that locale close to you now, or is that close to where you grew up? Because you're in Texas now?
I'm in Texas now.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's near where I grew up.
Okay.
Yeah. So in Texas, it's a lot more about like fire regeneration of the plains and the fire regeneration of the earth and the reseeding of flowers and vegetation on the plains. So
so it's a very different landscape as well.
Yeah.
So that's going to be an interesting challenge for you, is like, how much are you relating to, your childhood location, and how much are you relating to your current location? And I think there's also potential interesting dialogue between those two things as you explore. So I think
that's a really good point. And then I am part of a group to like bring even basic recognition to Indigenous populations here in this area. Like Waco is named after a tribe of Indigenous people who were forced off the land. And I've made some connections with people here too. So I think I would be really interested to do research on their interest in the regeneration that comes from fire, and how I can bridge those worlds. I think that's a great suggestion. Thank you.
And is that a group that is like multicultural?
Mm-hmm.
That's really
so it started with just a bunch of us that were really frustrated. There's actually 0 land acknowledgement at Baylor.
Okay. That's your school?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so like I created one to the best of my ability for my classes, just because I couldn't imagine doing without. And then we were able to connect with, because this was sort of like a melting pot / mixing area for many different Indigenous tribes. So I've made connections, and we've made connections with people in the school who are like, okay, like I am Indigenous, who like don't recognize it publicly, but like came to us and said like, actually I am. So we've had really, really good like response, and we're able to now like sort of like hand off the work and just support them with like research and like whatever resources they need, so that like we're putting them in a place of like having the power and decision-making process to move forward. So yeah, it's been really exciting. And they finally, for the first time in the history of the university, had a land acknowledgement go out last week. So I'm so excited that it's like the basic first step, and we're not going to give up. We're going to keep moving forward. So so all of that is in my head right now as I'm thinking about fire and my own relationship with it and how like damaged my own relationship is. So
I wonder, like, without imposing or adding any extra like labor or like work onto that group, there may be a potential to involve them in your test as sort of a collective experience. I don't know what kind of, foundation you have for that kind of work within the group, but if that feels like a good environment, it could be pretty interesting to see what comes of that.
It's a great idea. Let me contemplate that and sort of think about what the navigation would look like. So thank you so much for your thoughts. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Michelle, Lawyn, do you have any thoughts, feedback? I'm going to mute because I have a call in the background.
I just think that those ideas are really exciting, Sarah. And I am super curious about, like, I love that there's like a lot of like, there's just so much intention behind your work in terms of like, like making a renewed relationship with traditional like land stewarding practices, but also like, how can you contribute with like your material relationships? Like what materials can you create with that are safe to burn? And like just doing that material investigation is so valuable. I'm really curious to see what you end up working with. And so this next thing is a comment kind of out of complete ignorance, but I know like, Burning Man is this huge festival thing where the whole like design impetus is you create things to burn. And so I can imagine there's at least a decent wealth of research to mine in terms of like construction of like things that are safe to burn, or what is safe to burn. Like I don't know if everything that gets burned at a festival like that is safe, but I know that there is like a design principle of leave no trace or leave. So I don't know if that's like, because there's such a huge community of people like building structures with the intention of burning, like that might be something interesting to look into.
That's a good question. I have several friends who used to go back in the day, and then it's become something else now. So like it's sort of become sort of a haven for like tech people to like come, and so like the like environment has shifted a little bit. But my cousin and several of my good friends used to go back in the day, and with this idea of like leave no trace, take everything you need, leave nothing behind. So that's a really, really good thought. I will explore that with those people. That's a great question.
Cool.
And I wanted to say too, Lawyn, I really loved the way that you made the connection with like the lighting and the bleach bottles. I had seen like something very briefly on it, but I hadn't seen how they had used solar panels to make it something that was accessible at night. And I just think it's so exciting and has so many possibilities. So I was very excited to see your concept, even though I was driving. It was awesome. So I'm very excited to see how you continue to play with it.
I agree. Great work. Okay, Michelle, do you have any seed concepts to share today, or you shared yours yesterday, right?
I shared one yesterday that's sort of the farthest along, but I don't know if Lawyn or Sarah was there. I'm happy to recap it. I'm also like earlier in my process for a couple other seeds concepts that really do need some work. So I'm happy to just sort of share where I'm at with all of them. And also I would love to just like jam on some ideas, because I'm so like, there's one that I'm working on today that I do have like seed ideas, but I don't have like a full design concept yet. So I'd love to just chat it out.
Well, I'd say, why don't you lead with the ones you're still working on, because we can always watch the recording for the one you did yesterday. And then if we have time, we can come back to it. And then I also have 2 that I can share. So if you want to do one, and then I'll do one, and then you can do one, and then I can do one.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Okay.
Take it away.
How am I gonna do this? Oh, sorry. I have like a phone and a laptop going. I'm just gonna shift over for a second. All right, maybe I'll pull up like my Pinterest board, because like I think I'm just gonna end up talking through the concept anyways. So the play that I'm working on right now is At What Cost by Kiki Rivera, which takes place in Oahu, Hawaii. And it takes place 50 years after the Green New Deal has been put in action, and Hawaii is now independent and sustainable. And it's sort of, there's a character, like some matriarch or like grandmother character, and a bunch of little girls, and then they all also play the roles of protectors of the island, sort of like deities. I haven't really gone, like, I feel like there's a lot of like cultural research needed for this process, because it's incredibly culturally specific. But one of the biggest themes in the, well, not biggest themes, there's a lot of themes, but a big story arc is how these land protectors protest different forms of sort of green energy that was not actually sustainable for the local indigenous populations. So it specifically focuses on wind turbines and how they, because they obstruct natural ecosystems and indigenous communities, that they can't actually be considered to be sustainable in that particular environment. And they talk about the infrasound caused by the turbines actually causes health issues, causes migraines, anxiety, depression, cardiovascular problems like sleep disorders, and it can trigger seizures. In like one character has a son who has epilepsy. So it's just like, for me, it was like, that was like the key thing that I like locked onto. But there's also the contrast of the recurrent earthquakes in Hawaii that they're not scared of, and the matriarch character is telling the children, like, that's just like the earth just like communicating something to us, and like we don't need to be scared of that type of like seismic rumbling. So that kind of inspired me to want to explore the quality of vibrations and like work with vibrations in a physical sense, but also potentially in a visual sense. So maybe I'll share my screen just to show some research images. On my, okay. So, I'm just gonna share my whole desktop. Sorry, it's a bit of a mess. But this image is, so this is called a Chladni plate. It's like a physics science experiment where essentially you can, using, either an instrument or a subwoofer, by creating vibrations on like a metal plate, you can visualize waveforms using sand, and depending on the frequency of the sound, it will move the sand into different formations. And I thought like this was like really inspiring in terms of a way to visualize very like almost in mechanical, like singular frequency sounds, because if you play like a high frequency at a single note with not very much like a harmonic to it, so like a sort of a pure frequency, you'll get these grid patterns. And I thought that they have a natural feeling to them, but they're not, but there's also something kind of irregular about them. So I wanted to like in some way incorporate this like cymatic wave visualization into the set design. I was thinking maybe doing the effect like practically in the space, but like possibly projecting like a video feed like top down onto a large floor. So like, because this, I'm not actually sure how possible it is to create this effect in a large scale, but I do know it's like fairly easy to do in like a small scale, like, a small dish. So I was thinking about using sound qualities to like create these like sort of regular waveforms, and then projecting that down onto a floor, and then also contrasting that with more organic wave shapes. So, you know, maybe you can see my entire desktop right now, eh? So I'll just show you, like, essentially I was trying to whip up like an image, but I'm not quite there yet. But I was thinking of like, if we're going to be using a top-down projection of like having like almost like an organic like ocean, you know, waves on the shore thing happening in the round, and then that type of thing would happen during like certain moments of the show when it's about like a more natural frequency, and we could like incorporate like maybe like subwoofer vibrations like in the space to like create like a little bit more of an organic rumbling in the space. And then when they're getting into talking about wind turbines, to go into like slightly flatter like tone sounds, and then that's when we would bring in the like the cymatic waveforms. And here's like another example of like cymatic waveforms on water that is interesting because it's like organic, because it is a natural phenomenon, but it's also not. Here, I'll just like show this video because I think it's really quite fantastic. Maybe, sorry, this is maybe a bit long. Let's just skip ahead. Yeah, there we go. So this is like pulsing at different frequencies. So like I think there's something quite beautiful about it, but it's also a little bit unsettling. So I think for me, it's just about like nuancing the relationship of like how we can affect natural systems, and like something like a wind turbine like can be well intended, but it can have all of these like quite I don't know, unnatural consequences. So like, I don't know. I'm still working on this. I'm not quite sure where to go, but this is like the big design impetus is like working with these like cymatics, which is like a visualization of a waveform, either in like sand or water, and like likely incorporating that in projections and contrasting the like in more mechanical sound tones with like more organic like vibrations and rumbling. Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at for that.
I think what's one of the things that's really interesting to me about the cymatic like waveforms is the ways in which they move from order to chaos and back again, just based on like small changes. And I think that's really interesting in the context of the play with this idea of like, hey, it's all sustainable, but also there's these vibrations, and like the ways in which like that contrast seems interesting to me, like that way in which you can explore vibrations which have order and vibrations which are chaotic and destructive. I think that's really exciting, and also just like how that transition happens back and forth is fascinating to me.
Yeah, thanks.
Michelle, there's something really compelling to me in exploring the limitations of scale on this exercise, because I love the idea of integrating into projection, but I also think if there's a way to have some version of the thing on stage, and then you could expand scale through projection as well, but that connection between something actually happening. And so if you, I mean, the dream would be you could create your whole floor as like a box with this happening under the performers. But if you can't get the same effect on such a large scale, maybe it's just a podium, maybe it's little tiles, you know, and you can have this beautiful, because that kind of patchwork effect that Pinterest did to those sand images was stunning. So you could actually have tiny little things making a whole patchwork of kind of that relationship between the chaos and the calm. So I really, you know, in that ideal world where you can collaborate with, you know, a scientist and a technician, would be kind of understanding the limitation of scope and scale and trying to integrate something tangible into your set, and then maybe expanding on that through projection on a wall, you know. So you're kind of immersed, but also getting that real experience that the audience can then, prior to the show or after, see these things up close and personal and like feel them. And then maybe your soundscape is literally impacting your space in situ somehow. So I don't know, there's something really cool about the interplay, and I would just try to extend how far you can go with the real experience, and then how you can theatricalize it as well.
And I feel like too, like that, I think it's interesting that you can do those naturally with sand and you can do those with water. And so like, what does it look like to have both of those and like that interplay as we're thinking about Hawaii? Like, I think that would be really interesting in like a practical standpoint to like think about like how do the vibrations like affect the water and the sand in slightly different ways. And then also if you wanted to go full like digital scope, like again, like she was mentioning the really great like way that you put it together. Like could you have something that's like an algorithm that takes what's happening physically on stage with that work and translates it into like images that get shifted based on that, and then have that like take over the space? I think that could be really interesting too.
Cool.
I'm thinking if it would be possible, just like in a small scale, because you mentioned like earthquakes, like if you had like maybe a platform on like different how do you call it, like the springs, some are like really like I can't think of like the English term.
Keep trying to describe it, we can help you.
Think of like a platform, and then it's on top of like a lot of springs. Some don't like bounce as much, and some are just like really stable. And I'm just thinking if it's also possible, because this is connected to Hawaii. I'm not sure if you're familiar with those like balance boards. It's like this platform with this log type under it. Some skateboarders use it. So that in a bigger scale where you kind of like try to find a balance. So if you put like sand on top of it or something, it might be able to create like this different like landscapes or something. And then maybe like if it's just like a single platform, take a video and then projection map it onto something bigger.
I'm curious about this, like the balance board that you're talking about. You said something that skateboarders use? Oh, okay, sorry, I'm looking it up. And is this like a Hawaiian context thing? Sorry, I'm just Googling the balance board.
I don't know what you, let me look for something.
Lawyn, you could share
balance
your
screen.
screen. Lawyn could share her screen and show us what she thinks it
I don't know what you call it, but I hope I find.
But that is a really interesting impetus in terms of like getting the actors to experience like the ground moving under their feet, like having like different stabilities of like ground using like spring platforms. Yeah, that's so cool.
Here, let me. Oops, here. So there's one that looks like a skateboard and one that's round. So, and then there's like some have like rubber, some are made out of cork, some just like different types of like densities, if that's the right term. So yeah, so imagine like this round platform, and you just like try to balance on it, and then it depends on like how much movement you could do, or like no movement at all. So I don't know, maybe like sand pellets or small like things.
That
Maybe.
is really interesting, actually. And I wonder if like it's the type of thing where like maybe the platform is like full of sand at the beginning and then it's like falling off the sides, or if it is like there's a lip, so like it just moves out and in depending on like where the balance is. That could be interesting.
Very cool. I feel like this is a great, if it was happening in real life, it would be a great opportunity to collaborate with Alicia Poirier. There's this Canadian video designer who works with like ripples of water in which she'll do like a projection for a band, and there's water responding to the vibrations of the band, and then it's projected behind them. She makes these beautiful projection designs. So I feel like your dream team for this proposal would include someone like that, which would be really fun.
Totally.
Oh, awesome. Okay, shall we take maybe a 5-minute break? 8 minutes. Come back at 11, and then I'll show you my first C concept.
I am going to class now. My class starts soon, but I'll look at the recording afterwards. I'm making my way through all the recordings.
Amazing. And we'll be in touch by email so that you can make sure that you're keeping on the timeline to get things ready for the exhibition.
Thank you.
No problem. Lawyn, will you be back with us in 10?
Yeah.
Okay, see you at 11.
Yeah.
All right, so share screen. This one. Okay, can you see that? Great. Oops, I can't see you. Okay, so this is a C concept for Green New Steel by Corey Payette. And I'm just going to read an excerpt from the description of sort of the introduction to the play. So this is performed as a vlog, and Kara is 16 years old, rich but doesn't know it because all of her friends have more money than her. Privileged but doesn't know it because one time she didn't get chosen for the travel soccer team, and that sort of oppression really left a mark on her life. She is a daily vlogger and is a passionate advocate for climate change and sun chips. She is holding a cell phone in front of her and scrolling through questions. So I really wanted to juxtapose the reality of this teenager's excessive environment versus the polished vlog aesthetic of her videos, a la #Insta versus reality, which trends a lot, where you see what we see on social versus what the reality is. So I'd like the set design to be this sort of explosion of objects in her room, even though the video content might just be a simple purple backdrop, as per the lower image. And in this particular moment in time, she's recording one vlog video, which is called Wednesday Wake Up. But she does mention throughout this vlog other content that is on her channel. And she ends the vlog with the classic like and subscribe sort of salutation. So this got me thinking about how I could engage high school students in creating additional videos that we could upload to a channel, a fake channel under this character's name. So when the audience does leave, they are genuinely encouraged to subscribe and see all this other content. And I would like to collaborate on the design of the show with high school students. So I would work with them to source the set dressing for this very exaggerated, hyperbolized set of the bedroom from local waste facilities, and educate them about cradle to grave versus cradle to cradle design streams. And then each student would be assigned a research video for the life cycle of one of the items on the set. And they would upload these day in the life videos onto Kara's channel, so that when the audience subscribes, they will learn about consumer culture contribution to climate change. And each video would include a positive alternative to each item ending up at a waste facility. And therefore the students would be teaching the public about circular economy through these little tiny videos, because in the script, the character Kara mentions that her next video upload is going to be a day in the life of her, but we're going to kind of turn that on its head, and it's actually going to be a day in the life of all of her items in her bedroom that the audience gets a back behind the scenes point of view of. So that's my concept, and I think it would be really fun. And it would be also a great way to explore with students sort of the reality behind their own lived experience, and an opportunity for them to propose change for maybe their parents, who would probably be the primary audience members, or their fellow students. I'll show you some research as well. That's why I have this up here like this. So this is an example of that kind of like hashtag Insta versus reality situation, which I love. I think it's so, this is a great example of sort of the exaggerated aspect I'd like to play with the students. So there would be a degree of also like DIY video techniques that we would be exploring in this experience. And then this is a person, a blogger or a social media person called Shampoo Baritone. And they do these really cool photo collages of the Insta versus reality shots. And I really like them as inspiration for the concept. So what you see cropped in the frame versus what is like the full point of view. So yeah, this is my ideas.
So cool, Alex. I love that you like made this such a holistic educational experience. That's brilliant. I love how you've like worked the concept of like a YouTube channel into like this like much like wider thing. That's
nice.
That's awesome. Like do it. You should do it.
I also think it's a great opportunity to like go into a drama class and also teach like video techniques, or you know, the other opposite end of it, like make a collaboration between the kind of two media streams. So I think that's becoming more and more a reality in the professional world too. So, and I just think the students would have so much to offer in terms of techniques that I'd be like, cool, I'll help you with the theater stuff. You all are in charge of the video stuff. So I think it would be fun.
And everyone's in charge of environmentalism being at the heart of their process.
Yeah.
Like, that's so great.
And I'm excited to see how maybe we would bring in, I don't know how creative they would want to be about the day in the life concept. And like maybe it's more of an animation for some of the students where they actually like animate the item. You know, they could go wild with how they present the content. So yeah, it's also a really funny piece. I think it would be enjoyable to watch too. It has like a good dark humor aspect to it.
So cool.
It's actually interesting to like involve the students. This is coming from me who like gets submissions from like my students every week. So I get everything from like random TikTok videos of like time lapse of their projects to, you know, like they'll just tell me to like watch a Facebook live of like an animation thing they're doing. Yeah, you really would be surprised at what like kids would come up with like online.
Yeah.
And to see, or maybe because this is coming from like my experience of like being online for so long, where you see let's say their room and then zoom into like a spot, and then it totally like changes the whole like perception of the space. And then seeing it recorded online, like either via Instagram stories or like a TikTok video. So it's like this multi-dimensional view of the same space.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point you bring up, because I think this approach could apply to a digital platform very easily, as much as if we were in person and we were creating a set that is sort of a hybrid theater and film set combo. So I think it's a good point you bring up, that being online so long makes you think, oh, it could be possible if we were still online and we had to work on it from, distance. Yeah, I think it would be, it's also, I like the idea of sort of, Tanya kind of brought this up, where everything she does is a little bit of like a provocation, or like pushing people outside their comfort zone without them necessarily knowing it. So I would be really happy to sort of keep them in their comfort zone in the media and the format, but where they're going with that content creation, I hope would be a new territory for them. So I think that, yeah, just sort of being subversive in that way of pushing people outside their comfort zone in a comfortable way is interesting to me. Also, just like, how many times do you get your parents to follow your channel? Probably rarely. So this like propagation as well to like intergenerationally exchange could be sort of something they might really want without admitting that they would like that sort of, attention. So I'm also curious about really making it about an intergenerational experience where they get to be the leaders. I think that would be fun. So yeah, Lawyn, by all means, you can take this and run with your students. I don't know when I'm going to have high school students to work with, so if you're at all interested.
Just because you mentioned it, would you guys be open to, like, I don't know, if I invite you to, I don't know, maybe be a guest in one of like our online like projects or something?
Totally.
And I don't know, something. Yeah, because like, yeah, just so I can introduce them to, something more than what we're doing, online, just to kind of like bring them out into the real world, I guess.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course.
Shoot us an email and we'll make it work. That would be really fun. And also, if you ever want to use the plays with your students, I think that there's also that's always an option. We would just have to check outside of the set festival schedule what the expectations are for intellectual property. But Ian, who's one of the professors we've been working with, is part of the organization. So if you ever have an interest to use the plays with your students, then we can ask him how to move forward with that too.
Yeah, and I think because of the format of the plays, that it's, just like short, like there's no like pressure to do this like whole, I guess, like scene per scene, like, act 1, act 2, act 3 type of project. Yeah,
exactly. I think that they're very well suited to an educational context, especially for high school in particular. I think they're really well suited to that. So yeah, you can always reach out. You have our email address, and like we're thrilled when things take on a second life outside the charrette. That's the whole point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Alex, I feel like this play format is so great, such a digestible amount of information for high school students, because I remember in high school it taking like so long to read a play in class. Like I think it took us like at least a couple of weeks to like read a Shakespeare or something when we would read every day in class. But like firstly we couldn't understand it, so it was literally the actor translating it. But like this is just, yeah, I think it's a great context, because like how long is a high school class anyways? And
well,
you have such limited time.
Yeah, so like in Canada it would be, September till December.
Oh no, I mean like the actual class time.
Oh, it's usually an hour.
Like, is it an hour? Is it 45 minutes or something like that?
Like 45 minutes with the transition between class. But yeah, it's very short.
And that's wild, because like you have such a limited time to like really impart ideas and encourage thought and conversation. So I feel like this is such a great like a great thing that you could do quickly. Like you could do this over a semester, or you could do this over 2 days, you know?
Yeah, I think the challenging part would be if we were doing an in-person version, like how to find safe and accessible ways to source the set materials. Like I don't want to endanger the students, put them in at health risk, or, you know, make them like visibly uncomfortable with the experience of sourcing from like waste. But I think there's probably a lot of resources out there that we can use to still get the educational experience of like cycle analysis. And that's the other thing, is it could be a collaboration with like a science class as well. Like it could be a multiple credit, like if we're doing true life cycle analysis, it could be in collaboration with science and with like media and with theater. Sort of like giving, if, you know, when I was in teachers college, I always wondered why we didn't do more like collaborative coursework, but you know, it always depends on the instructor's availability for that. So yeah, it could be fun. And like field trips to dumps. They're gonna hate me. I'm gonna be that teacher if we do this. They're gonna be like, no, absolutely not.
I actually have a good friend who works at a dump, and she was telling me about like the just the sheer amount of perfectly functional things they get dropped off. That it's purely the convenience option, and the dump is not technically allowed to do anything with the things. Like they're not allowed to give it away or resell it. Like they might be able to direct certain things like electronics to electronics recycling, but like if they get a boat, you know, it's gonna just sit in the dump. Like you can't take it away. It's like illegal. So at least in Canada. So it's wild. And same with things like, you know, perfectly functional like TVs, you know, I'm sure people skim off the top and like take things home like if they work there, but there's no
reverting the stuff back into a
there's just no infrastructure for circulation except for like a few little charity shops, which are like, you know, not the primary option for a lot of people. And not the most convenient option.
I think that's where I'd have to do some like pretty concerted work of like making those contacts and being like, okay, what is possible? And if we can't go to a facility, is there some like, you know, in between place between the pickup and the drop off, you know, or do we just curb hunt? You know, there are a few options, but I think like the feasibility of the waste sourcing would be the hardest part of this project to like facilitate realistically. But I would put a lot of effort to figure it out. There's also like donation centers and all that kind of stuff. So I know the like easy backup plan is like we get everything from Valley Village. You know, we could still apply the principle to that, but it'd be even cooler to literally save things from the dump somehow.
Yeah, totally. So, maybe it's I don't know, this is maybe a bad idea, but maybe it's as simple as like getting people's attention before they drive into the dump and being like, do you have anything that is usable? Just like intercepting that.
I know, it's like, do we set up a meetup point on the road to the dump where it's like high school students being like, car wash, AKA give us your garbage. I just don't want to get anyone in trouble, so I'd have to be like pretty careful about how I set it up. But yeah, I think there's probably ways. There's ways. So yeah. Michelle, do you have another in process one that you wanted to talk about? Or are you still early days?
I did present this in process like in like really early days, like super in process. I have like a collage I think that I could share. Let me just find it. Yeah, so I did present this actually in like one of the early GNL classes. It was like my concept collage for The Deal. I think it's that play that it was like, see if I can even find my stuff. The Deal by Javad Alipur, which was like the collective imagining like story of Abdullah Tariqi, who is the like Saudi oil minister for many years. So that like I haven't taken too many steps forward yet, but I'm having a hard time finding my own process work for this. So
I can also share my second one, and then like
yeah,
no
why
pressure,
don't you share your second one?
Okay.
And I'll see.
And then we can also end early. That's also totally legit decision since you've already presented your other one. Okay, let's see what I got here. Oh, wow. One sec. Where is it? Here we go. Okay. Share screen, sky, share. Okay, so this is one that I'm trying to put into a theater. And this is a very early collage rendering. So I'm currently in rural Ontario, southwestern Ontario, in a town called Petrolia, and they have a theater here called the Victoria Playhouse. And it's a really beautiful old building, and it's a hub for the community here. My partner is singing in a show, and he jokes about the fact that the whole town has a dark day that lines up with the theater's dark day. So like all the businesses are closed on the day that there's no shows, and they open every other day because this is such a central point of the community. So I thought, while I'm here, I'll try to imagine designing for this particular space in this particular community. So Petrolia's history is that it was the center of oil in Canada and North America in the Victorian era. And so it was a booming center for oil production, and still does produce oil. And it's also a farming community. So there's a lot of history of, dairy products and other crops, but like dairy is a big producing thing in this area. So I walked around this small town, which has one main street, and every single store is like a gift store. Like it's just like all gifts. And there's a big culture in southwestern Ontario of a certain generation collecting china, in particular Royal Beltons, which are these figurines of ladies, which I can show you a picture of after. It's an England company from England that produces these china figurines that are women of different eras in fancy dresses, and you're supposed to collect them in these china cabinets, which is also a very Victorian aesthetic of collecting items. So I'm walking around and I'm seeing mostly this sort of aesthetic, but it is also an aesthetic that is sort of going out of fashion. So it is not quite, the current younger generation's aesthetic. It is something of an era gone by. And there's a bit of a joke in our culture now that, our inheritance is going to be china sets and these figurines that we don't have use for. But our parents and our grandparents say, well, they're going to be worth a lot of money one day. And we're not quite sure when that's going to happen. But it's sort of a bit of a rhetoric, and it's a little bit of a joke, I'd say, in like our culture. So my idea to source something that is like very local and available is to go through the auction circuit, which is also a big practice in rural Ontario, is auctions and estate sales, and also secondhand stores, and try and find all these china cabinets, which usually the joke is like, what am I supposed to do with this china cabinet in my tiny apartment these days? It is very much like of a different time. So I would try to source these china cabinets, and then also source different items of china, collectibles, locally. And this is like a first version of the china cabinets being intact, but I'd like to work with like taking them apart and constructing some sort of abstract, busy space that is full of like the china cabinets maybe they're taken apart and like built on top of each other, and it's sort of towering over this domestic scene in the middle, which in the play is two parents who are talking to police officers about their son who has decided to steal all the cows in the world and keep them in the house because he's afraid of the Green New Deal, saying that like we can't have hamburgers and ice cream anymore, and like what are we going to do? So it's sort of this surreal play of him trying to steal all the cows and keep them in his house. And so I'm imagining that behind this structure that we build with these china cabinets, there will be platforms behind it, so you can see the son kind of walking up and down behind as if it's like the upstairs of the house. But there's this fear of like the bull in the china shop expression of like imagining the whole house being full of cows, and the house is like a china cabinet of these like precious, quote unquote, precious china objects that could break very easily if a cow was shoved up a set of stairs with a cabinet. So a very abstract idea of like a domestic space that is very specific to Southwestern Ontario. And like we never see the cows, but we just have that fear that's been instilled in us by previous generations of like, watch the china cabinet, like, oh no, don't break the china. So yeah, that's what I would want to play with, is sort of this silly commentary that I hope this local audience would also like feel that apprehension and feel the hilarity of that situation. And hopefully we'd be able to find everything here locally without, having a lot of extra building materials. So that's my early like collage, and like I'm not sure how I would reassemble these cabinets, which are usually it's like a glass front with shelves and like a really beautiful wooden frame. But I think it would be a lot of fun to imagine how to create almost like a jigsaw puzzle of a front of all these cabinets with the risers behind it that the kid's like popping his head out of behind the parents on like a simple couch with maybe a carpet. We'll see. So that's my idea, and it's the only one I've done like in a specific theater space.
Alex, this is really funny. Excuse me.
Oh, do you want to
Lawyn.
see what a Royal Dalton looks like, Lawyn? Yeah,
Yes,
it's like, it's a very specific thing. I will pull one up.
Lawyn, is the bull in a china shop expression like transferable?
What? Sorry?
So the expression is, sorry, hold on. One second. The expression we use for like someone who's very destructive is like a bull in a china shop, as in they're gonna smash everything. So like the context of like cows with like a bunch of china cabinets is like a very funny visual metaphor. But I don't know if it transfers across languages.
It's the first time I've heard that.
Okay. Well, this is a very specific cultural response to this play. The playwright is from New Zealand, but I think because New Zealand is also like a colony of England, they would probably have a similar associations with a lot of these cultural things which come from our like English heritage in Canada. So these are some examples of a Royal Dalton figurine.
Oh my gosh. So, my grandma and my aunt used to have like, I'm seeing several ones on this Google search that I like stared at as a child and was like, oh my God, this is like the most beautiful thing I've ever seen.
Me too.
And now,
my Nana had them, Christopher's mom has some. And I think like if you ever read like an announcement for an estate sale or an auction, it's usually one of the main things that's listed as like a high value item, quote unquote. So this is sort of a very, very specific cultural response to the play. And I also think there's a really key line in the play where the son who's trying to get all these cows, his friend is helping him, and she's a girl, and they have a bit of like a cheeky conversation about, oh, you have to treat a woman with respect because the cow they're leading is a female cow. And there's this commentary on like treating women with respect because the playwright has written this whole satire about what's the American politician that presented the Green New Deal, the female.
Oh, AOC.
Yeah.
I mean, Alessia Ocasio-Cortez.
Exactly. So it's a commentary on like disrespect that she's received for being a young woman of color. So that's another reason why like I'd love to find as many like figurines of women to put in this set as possible, as like a little bit of a reflection on that line and that satire. It's a very satirical piece, so it's supposed to be ridiculous. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I don't know how the audience here would like it, but
when you shared the screen of like the theater, it actually looks like my grandmother's living room.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the old like antique furniture that you couldn't touch.
Yeah.
Or yeah.
So okay, that's how I'm happy to hear that there is an association even outside of our specific locale of like a generational gap, I think too, of like what is valuable and what needs to be preserved. So yeah.
And I guess the counterpart of that Royal Dalton?
Royal Dalton.
I just like remember the Liadro. I don't know if you're familiar. It's very similar to those like figurines. I could actually take a picture of my grandma's living room and I could just like, yeah.
I love it. Well, that's interesting to consider that like even if we were to try to commit to a different community's sort of specific reference points, that there could be an extension of the concept. But the joke in my family is always like, everyone asks me if I want like the antiques, and I'm like, where am I going to put them in my 1-bedroom apartment? Like there's also a big commentary on, you know, property and land ownership and like the difference in generations idea of owning things or collecting things or keeping things that I think is central to this play. It's like ridiculous that this boy thinks he can keep all the cows in the world in his house. So yeah. We'll see. I don't know if Petrolia Playhouse or they'll be sold on this critique of culture, but you know, that's a hypothetical world where they're like,
it would actually be really funny to like I'm just thinking like, say you could like rattle the cabinets from behind or like push things off the shelf from behind, so like almost like the china's falling as they're like pushing a cow up the stairs and like smashing.
I would love that.
That could be interesting.
I would love that. I think that would be really fun. Like we could simply just really secure those front cabinets so nothing comes, but things fall within as well. So there's like no danger to the performers. Right. But like if we just had that like effect of something falling within the panels too, could be interesting. And if, you know, we could also do theater magic tricks, but I just wouldn't want to like move too far away from using things that are in the community and adding, you know, but if there's a way to like just the sound effect and the shaking and all of that would be really cool. So yeah, a tower of china cabinets.
I love it. Awesome.
So silly.
And yeah, there's an abundance of china cabinets and figurines out there in the world. So it's such a great,
I think it's like it would be a fun sourcing project, especially in like rural communities, because there's just like barns full of this stuff. So yeah, really fun. Anyways, that's my like rural Ontario vibes.
I love it.
So how do you guys think about just ending early today?
I feel good about it. Only because I have
midnight here anyways.
Oh my gosh, yeah, you get to bed. But send us an email about anything in the new year that we can help out with your students. I think it'd be really fun. And also take your time if you do want to add any little adjustments to your seed concept. We're not in a time crunch yet.
Usually like up to what extent would you like present the concept?
I think that where you have your concept right now is already a seed concept in our definition. So there's no pressure to like move it further along, because a seed concept for us is like a first idea. But if you wanted to like place your setting into a public space in your model, that would be like just if you wanted to try extending your concept further. But it's totally up to you. Where it is already a fully fledged concept in our opinion. So like even me, I might not do a second collage of those cabinets constructed in an alternative way. I might just write a description that like that's something I'd like to try to do. So it's really up to you. And then you can upload them onto the drive, which all the instructions are in the last email that we sent on how to upload them. And if you have any questions, you can just let us know. And then we'll be exhibiting them in August somehow. So there might be some correspondence about making sure that we're representing your work as you'd like it to be seen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
No problem. Have a good sleep. And we're going to be getting together one more time next week. So we'll send one more email this weekend. If you can join us, great. And if not, it was so nice to have you.
All right. Thank you again. I'll
Yeah,
see you soon.
awesome to see you and meet you. Bye.